Hi guys, so this is Why Not. Today I'm going to be making a no bullshit guide on how to improve in Valorant. I'm going to be going over like 10 major tips that I think are probably the most important things in the game, and obviously I'm going to not waste any time just trying to explain exactly how to do things as quickly as possible, and there's going to be timestamps so you can go from each part if you think that you already know how to do each one of these things. So number one thing I think is pretty important is actually finding your sensitivity in the game. So I'm going to in the description actually place down conversions. I actually think the one they gave, the developers actually gave us wrong. They said that you need to multiply your siege sensitivity, and your siege sensitivity is already going to be probably like 12 or something, and you're multiplying that in game. Most people are playing like 0.5 in this game, so it'd be a bit ridiculous to have it over. I think they wanted to multiply it by like 1.2, so you would have it at like something like 14 sensitivity. It'd be insane. I'm going to have a description of how to actually change your sensitivity, like from CSGO, from Siege, from Fortnite, and from Overwatch. But a really easy trick to do to see if your sense actually feels right is actually tracking something, and just see if it's easy to track, like while you're walking around the map. If it's easy to track, then you've probably got a decent sensitivity. For me, I'm just using the sensitivity. It might not actually be the best one for me, but it's because I've been using it in CSGO for so long that I'm actually kind of used to it. I'll probably play better with a slightly higher sense, but there you go. Alright, the second tip actually in the game is aim over utility. So let me just quickly give an example. As Jet, right? So you use utility actually to help your aim tools rather than using your utility in full stop, right? So in a game, for example, the smoke grenade that Jet gives, the reason why this is useful is because it can actually block off positions and peek other angles, for example. So you say you block off mid, so you can peek this area, so you're safe from anybody pushing you mid. Or it could be so that you can say sneak up on someone, go inside the smoke, wait for it to dissipate, and then have an easy aim duel because they're not expecting you there, right? That's kind of an example of how to use utility to help you aim rather than using utility overall and focusing on that in general. So I know a lot of people who will literally dedicate a lot of time into gimmicks using utility. For example, this whole tilt thing with the smoke grenades. It's really unnecessary, guys. In reality, the majority of the game is determined basically by your positioning, your aim, and so on. So just literally focus more on that kind of stuff to begin with. Then you can get into utility, because that stuff will actually help you progress and get further with your aim. Third tip, obviously, is actually going to be improving your aim. So I'll just quickly demonstrate real quickly to you guys. So here we are in the built-in aim trainer. If you guys actually don't know, because I actually didn't know how to get into this area, the button for it will be right out here on your screen, usually right above play game, but because I'm already in the aim trainer, it doesn't actually show me yet. And what actually a lot of people I know that are new don't actually know is that you can actually hit F3 and have all these options for the aim trainer inside the game. All of this is going to help. It's very similar to aimbots in CSGO. So this is kind of like the aimbots mode in CSGO, where obviously you have a bunch of bots that just spawn and you just can tap away at them really. But I think what's really important is actually focus on the hard mode on the speed test, and then hit start. This is actually really good practice for one taps and fast flicks in game. If you can get over 10 to 15 in this game, then I'd say you have pretty decent aim. I personally get about 15 to 20, but obviously I need some practice. I've just woken up. But yeah, it's a really easy way to practice your aim. Obviously, if you can't do hard straight away, start off with medium bots. I think everybody should be able to start off with medium and then work up their way to hard. If you're hitting all 30 bots, then clearly your training is wrong. And yeah. So tip number 3 is improving positioning. This is also really simple in games. It ultimately comes down to understanding how many angles there are to a certain point. So I'm going to use a non-map, right? Because obviously, if I just use a map, I'll know by default what positions are good just from me playing the game from experience. But for example, holding an angle like this out in the open when I'm exposed to the doorway here is terrible. You want to be behind this kind of area here, just so you're less exposed, right? So obviously, I see a lot of people playing in game they're holding an angle like this when there's a doorway right here where enemies can clearly be, right? Which is a lot worse than say playing like this. right? Where if enemies kind of come across here, they're going to be more startled, right? Then, or for example, holding it from like up here, right? If you play out in like a corner position, it means you're exposed to both angles at exactly the same time while you're holding an angle. If you play here, you're not actually exposed to this angle back here. So yeah. Also making sure you have positions that you can easily rotate away from. So for example, if I want to have this enemy right here, so this one is my enemy, and I want to actually like, you know, have a fight with him, you want to be just out enough to be able to shoot him clearly, and then obviously peek back afterwards so you don't get shot by the second player there. So there you go. That's kind of the idea of positioning and kind of jiggling around angles. So the third one is improving movement. This is also really helpful because you can actually improve your movement in this game. What a lot of people mistake in movement is that usually people think like b-hopping is movement and stuff like that, and kind of moving around the map quickly and efficiently. It's less about that and it's more about cutting angles. So how effectively can you cut angles in the game? And I'd say like a really easy way to practice that is actually the in-game bomb diffuser map, which I would actually set to hard mode again, and this will make sure that you've constantly got good crosshair placement and movement, which by the way comes into the second tip. Also do this for crosshair placement. So it's pretty simple, just basically predict where they're going to be on this map, and as long as you have good crosshair placement and decent firing angles, you should be able to win the round. There you go, and obviously secure yourself a win in this. That also translates in game, right? Because you're practicing angle play, your rotational kind of crosshair placement, and also your movement because of how quickly you can kind of cut an angle, right? So this is kind of like that's like a bad example of how to cut an angle, right? You just kind of stayed out here, or this is also a bad example, right? But say I want to see there, that's a good example. Like I've literally just cut the angle there, just saw the person stop just in time to shoot him before he could probably react to me. Angles also really important in this game. So understanding, that's also you can kind of practice in this mode, but also it's really important to understand in game. You shouldn't be hitting an angle in a game like this like you would in Siege, right? Because in Siege obviously you're tilting, right? So that means that not your whole body is exposed, just about the tip of your head and your shoulder when you do this kind of angle, and therefore if someone swings you can swing out with them, right? But in this game, if you do this, your whole entire half of your body is exposed, while you only get to see a sliver of them for a millisecond. You probably are going to react. They're going to swing out to about here and then kill you, right? So you probably want to swing out a little bit more. Make sure that you have the right position to make sure that you can secure a kill a lot easier. 8th tip. We're doing 8th tip now, that's quick. 8th tip, don't be toxic, and also don't try and make your teammates improve in games. So simply put, you telling your teammate how to play in game, say you have a better understanding of how to play in a video game than them, you trying to explain it to them will never really work. It will just get them to be more toxic, or damage their ego essentially. A person will improve at their own pace, and the thing is that you're probably never going to meet a person you met in game a second time, right? So it's best just to kind of leave it be. If someone's playing badly, just completely ignore them. Play your game, play as well as you can, and hope that you can kind of carry the game for them, or hope that the rest of the team compensates for how they're playing. Obviously, making them more salty will just make them play worse. If you're trying to make them improve, you're going to fill their mind with more information that they don't need at that current time. They're already struggling to play the game. So if you make them think about something else and they do actually want to improve, you're going to actually make them in turn play worse. Things shouldn't be like at the forefront of your mind when you're playing a game. It should be already intuitive, like based off intuition. And number 9 tip is basically focus on playing better in game than gimmicks. So obviously when you go and play in a video game, a lot of people will have like these set of YouTube videos that they kind of watch where they show like cool tips and tricks with Phoenix, where you can throw a Molotov half map and then that blocks a certain rotation or something, or this crazy boost that you can look into. Like, don't focus on that stuff. Like, ultimately, most of it tends to be really expensive utility costs, not really paying off that well. In reality, the way that you should be playing the game is the way that it's meant to be played, which is obviously peeking your angles, using your utility, how you're meant to use it to help you secure a kill. Like I said before, securing positions, holding map control. Focus on that stuff, you know, getting bomb plant down and securing the bomb to like, you know, an explosion or whatever, instead of focusing more on the silly gimmicks, such as like, you know, crazy 200 IQ overwall flashbangs. I don't know what the videos are because I don't focus on it, but obviously I see a lot of them out there and I think they're completely nonsense. And number 10, play smart. So that comes down to like when you should peek and when you shouldn't. So it's a really simple. I'll actually probably display a clip and I'll voice over this audio on top of it. So essentially, when you're playing a certain position, right? If you're in a disadvantage, you should probably peek angles, right? So if you're at, say you're playing against players and you're on an eco round, right? Then you should probably peek, because peeking is essentially gambling in this game. It means that you have like about a 50-50 chance of winning an aim duel, right? You're not trying to outsmart them, you're not trying to like have them peek into you so that they can outsmart you. You're just basically coming down to like who has the better aim will win this duel. And therefore, if you do that in a disadvantage, it could pan out in your direction. And if you already have a disadvantage, say you're in 4 versus 5, if you die and make it 3 versus 5, you're not actually putting your team at that much of a disadvantage. But if you're in an advantageous position, you shouldn't peek. So if you're in a 5 versus 5 as a defender, if you're in, you know, a 5 versus 4, a 5 versus 3, a 2 versus 1, don't peek without your teammate. You can peek together with your team, but obviously don't peek by yourself. It's an absolutely ridiculous thing to do. You just put yourself into a disadvantage, maybe neutral a game, and then end up losing the round because you peeked. And sometimes that's all it takes if you only have 2 people holding a bomb site, right? And that's basically all the tips I kind of have for you guys. It's really simple. If you focus on all those separate things individually, you should start playing really well. Obviously, if you enjoyed the tips, found them useful, found that they actually improved your gameplay, or you actually just want to check out this other stuff that I have, please feel free to check out my Twitch channel. I've also got some montages, obviously showing off how I've improved in the game so far, which isn't that great, by the way. I'm still improving as well, along with everybody else. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and see ya.